Apologies for being a few minutes late. My name is Bill McManus, and I'm a recently retired chairman of the music ed department at Boston University, and spent about almost 40 years before that in public school music. And it's really an honor for me tonight to be here to dedicate this beautiful auditorium to Lowell Mason. Lowell Mason, as we all know, is generally regarded to be the founder or the father of music education in the United States. And having been involved for so long in music education in so many ways, I've come to have a little different view of what his role actually was in the founding of music education in this country. You know, a lot of us think of music education, when we say, what is music education? Or what is a music educator? We tend always to think of public schools and public school music. And certainly we know that Lowell Mason was the first music teacher in a public school, happened to be in Boston. And we kind of focus in on that aspect of his contributions. But in actuality, his contributions were much, much greater than that. If we can think of music education in terms of public school music, but I intend to think of it in much broader terms than that. In public schools, we think of general music as an aspect of music education. There's instrumental groups such as bands, orchestras, jazz ensembles, choruses, madrigal singers, jazz choirs, music appreciation classes, music history classes, music theory classes. There's a whole range of things that happen in our public schools K-12 that are within the realm of music education. However, in my career, I did a lot of those things, and I had the opportunity towards the end of my career in public schools then to go on to teach at Boston University. And I became friends with many of the teachers at that school. And I realized that the people I used to look up to as being university professors were doing exactly the same kind of things that many of us were doing in the high schools and elementary schools. They were all teaching music. It didn't matter whether they were teaching in a university, a conservatory, a college. They were still involved in music education. In my career, after I finished my career in public schools, I did a lot of work with community bands. And I realized I was teaching again. And all of a sudden it occurred to me that community chorus directors, community band and orchestra directors, church choir directors, all of them are involved in music education. Wherever someone is learning about music, music education is going on. And wherever someone is teaching about music, that person is a music educator. And I want to try to convince you tonight that Lowell Mason wasn't just the first music teacher in a public school. He is really the one person who was kind of responsible for founding the whole field of music education in this country. So in order to give you, I think it's very important in order for you to really appreciate his contributions, I think I have to put him in a little bit of a historical context. He was born, as you know, here in Medfield in 1792. And I think back to that time, George Washington was in about the third year of his presidency. The Constitution had only been recently ratified in this country. It was a new nation. And as a matter of fact, he was born less than 200 years after the founding of Jamestown. So this was a very, very young country at that time. So what was the state of music in the 200 years prior to Lowell Mason in this country? Well, we do know, most of us do know, the state of music and music education in Europe. The 1600s was what we refer to as the Baroque era. And in that era we had such great composers as Scarlatti, Bach and Handel came along, and it brought that whole period of music to the heights around 1750. But the 1600s, the European musical culture was flourishing. And yet in this country, because it was such a new country, music was almost non-existent. In the colonies, particularly around this area, in the Boston area, of course the Puritans had settled here, and that culture almost frowned upon music. The only music to speak of in the culture was congregational singing in churches, or what were really meeting houses at the time. And to give you a little bit of an idea of what that might have been like, I wish I could have been there to hear it. But people didn't read music or follow directors. What would happen is something they called lining out psalms. There would be a leader, a church leader, who would sing a line from the psalm, and then the members of the congregation would sing the line. And this would continue on and on. And I've heard, I haven't heard it myself naturally, but I've heard it described as being kind of crude and almost barbarous. By the end of the 1600s, there was a tremendous desire in this country to improve singing in church choirs. And around 1720, in churches, people began to sing by reading notes, of what they called at the time singing by rule and art, kind of a strange term, because I don't think there was much art to it at the time. But anyway, the better singers generally kind of sat together in these churches, and they would sing together. And this is actually where the idea of a church choir came from.